thoughtful ideas and suggestions for guests and topics.
Great events, programs, and
Hello and welcome to this segment of Dialogue Houston. I'm your host, Lawrence Payne. To our regular viewing audience, welcome. To those joining us perhaps for the first time here for HCC's TV Dialogue Houston, we're here now every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 a.m. and again at 6 p.m. and Saturday afternoons at 3 p.m. As always, in the top of the hour, let me thank you for your thoughtful calls, emails, and text messages concerning previous shows we've aired here on HCC's TV Dialogue Houston, where after all, this is your community affairs, public affairs show here on HCC TV, now proudly in its 27th season. We have a great show lined up for you today. We're going to look at a couple of aspects in our community. One is a young lady who's been with us on Dialogue Houston probably a few years ago now, but a face and name you should be familiar with, who's doing great things in our community. And of course, the second show now is part of our wonderful partnership with the Houston Public Library, where we'll be featuring two great segments, one on a wonderful program in relationship with the Houston Public Library called Brain Fuse. Gotta love that name, Brain Fuse. Everything you need to know about assisting you with homework and great study habits, et cetera, et cetera. But before we get to Brain Fuse, and then our partner, Mary Wagner, who has been with us many times and will tell us all the great stuff that's happening currently with the Houston Public Library. And remember, Mary has the best title of anybody in the United States, Youth Service Advocate. She's just an advocate. We all need an advocate. Adults could use an advocate too, by the way, Mary, so that's okay. We're gonna get to that and Mary in the second part of the show. But for the first part, here we go with our good friend, Leona Baker. And I paused there, Leona, because I was figuring we've known each other now about 20 plus years. You first got to Houston, I think in 2005, if I remember right, from Philadelphia, and I met you kind of right after that. So it's probably longer than that, who knows now.
Yeah. It's been a while.
But she is the CEO and president of Plans of Action Houston. Plans of Action Houston. You got to love that name. And she'll tell us all about it in a moment. But she has a great wealth of experience in the nonprofit world here in Houston. And the thing I've always enjoyed about her is her passion to help and to serve human beings, not just to survive, but to flourish. There's something about human flourishing, and not just ability to meet everyday needs and survive, but to really thrive and to flourish. Our organization in the past that she was associated with, many of you may remember that name, Gulf Coast Community Service Association, one of the best programs we've ever had in the city when it comes to matching people's needs and resources together. And in that role, and even in the new role of the Plans of Action Houston, the thing I've always admired is that they do their work with dignity for all human beings. It is about treating all human beings not only fairly and honestly and justly, but with human dignity. And that is a big part of the social service world right now. And a big part of that reality is how to engaging with people with dignity. So I could go on and on about her and her work, but I'm just going to stop and say welcome. And so great to have you on this segment of Dialogue Houston. So tell us, first of all, catch us up a little bit from those days, and tell us what you've been doing, and then lead us into Plans of Action Houston.
Absolutely. Well, firstly, my passion at this time is currently my podcast, where I inspire people, which is a part of Plans of Action Houston, actually. When we moved and transitioned into the COVID climate, I felt it was very necessary for us to have inspiration in order to stimulate hope. There were so many people just starting to feel the daunting era of like a dark blanket over them. They started to lose their hope in humanity, hope in the future. And so I had to transition a little bit to help inspire people so they wouldn't lose sight of their goals, so they wouldn't lose sight of their passion and purpose in life, okay? But nonetheless, just getting back on Plans of Action Houston itself and how it came about, once I became a single parent, Larry, I decided to transition into the educational field. I didn't anticipate becoming a single parent, but since that occurred, I said, what do I want to do? What do I like to do? How can I utilize this wealth of skill set that I have, over 20 years of experience speaking, over 20 years being in the nonprofit sector, working with the largest community action agency in Texas, working with Collaborative for Children and several other organizations. What is it that I can birth, that I can give back to the community and also generate income and also focus on wealth building for my family, and also be in a position to help other people who are in need? So that's how Plans of Action Houston came about. Now, when you say plans of action, what does that mean? A plan of action is a series of clear steps that are outlined tasks with resources and a time frame attached. It will help you to get to your specific goal that you may have. And a lot of times people don't realize, if you have a goal in mind, whether it's a personal goal, whether it's a professional goal, you don't want to lose sight of the resources that you need along the way. And plans of actions aren't just for individuals. They can also be for organizations. A plan of action can take on an individual approach, but it can take on a collective approach. Now, for my business itself, when I had a vision for my business, I envisioned a world where we have resources that are equalized. Because if you have a business, first of all, you have human resources because you have people. People possess resources. In fact, I like to say that we are our greatest resource within our arm's reach. So each person around me is a resource. And then those individuals possess resources. And then outside of those individuals, the people that they know, they possess resources. I truly believe, Larry, that there should be no poverty here on earth. I truly believe that there is one person assigned to each individual in this world. When I did some research just the other day, just looking at the amount of money that is just being funneled through Texas, it is just unbelievable. We have about 56 billionaires living here in Texas alone, okay? 56 billionaires. When you look at the money collectively, that's about $8.7 trillion just with the billionaires. There is about 622,000 millionaires that live here in Texas. So when you add up, let's just say, I'm gonna just do a minimal amount of about, let's say, $5 million, multiply that by 622,000, you're looking at collectively with the billionaires and the millionaires at a minimum, $10 trillion. There is no reason, Larry, that we should have, when I woke up this morning and I saw, it just broke my heart. I saw children being thrashed out of their homes. I saw a man, this is a man, a human being, you know, with his family just crying because he doesn't have a place to go. They're being, you know, evicted. So for me, whether I have a small business, whether I'm working a nonprofit, I have to work from a place of integrity, you know, and the operating principles of my business, I call it IC3, integrity. You know, what is the quality of honesty that I'm bringing to the table? Creativity. We have to focus on creativity. We cannot take that out of the schools. We cannot take that out of the books. We cannot take that out of our mindset, because this is how we build, through creativity. Collectiveness. Who are we working with? Who are we sitting at the table? What are the skill sets that people possess? What are the resources that they have? And of course, courage. You have to have courage in order to be able to do anything, because there will be times where you feel limited. There will be times where you feel threatened, and you're going to have to consistently move beyond those emotions that are inhibiting you. Some of my goals as
let me hold you there for a minute. Let me stop you there just for a second. I'll let you go back. I wanted everyone to get a feel and a sense of you. As you could see, I could step away from this microphone and camera for the next half hour and just let her go. But one of the things that I've always admired about her is that her ability to raise money. This woman knows how to raise money. And when she was at Gulf Coast and other organizations, she kept them alive because she has a way of tapping into people who have the resources and giving them a reason to want to give, giving them a reason to participate in somebody else's well-being, giving them a reason to put their resources to use, and showing them how they're going to be utilized and the results they can have from sharing of their wealth, of their resources, of their talents, of their gifts and skills. And that's a very important thing in our world. In the pre-COVID-19 environment, all the issues that she's going to talk about more as we go forward, the poverty issues, those in need, and the healthcare issue, and the education system that is not right still yet, for particularly children of color. Now with the questions of unemployment and the filing for unemployment benefits across the state, that is just going up exponentially. The issues of now being evicted because folks don't have the money to pay their rent, that goes on and on and on. The city is going through, just like every other major city, but Houston, with the resources that are here, we had a little discussion over the weekend with a small group of people on another podcast. With this much wealth in this city, philanthropy and human beings who have funds and corporations and others, why is there so much suffering? That was the question posed by the leader of the podcast. Why is there so much suffering in Houston, the fourth largest city in America, yada, 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 all the things that go with that. Leonora has been able to always figure out a way to tap into that and to understand how those things connect. So I didn't want to cut you off, but I did want to stop you there for a moment to let you then now go into the next piece that you were about to go into and talk about how we can engage with you and the organization and the community, because you're a conduit. You've always been the connector, the bridge of connecting people in partnership together to do good. And that's really the piece that I really want you to focus on. So pick up kind of just where you left off and go ahead.
Well, I think that, I know there's a caveat, Larry, of people who watch your show. And I just want to thank you for having me here today, because I never take for granted who you are and the impact that you have made in not just my life as a mentor, but in the lives of so many people who are looking for direction and guidance. And so as it relates to moving forward collectively, I feel that people need to start tapping into, okay, what is their passion? Passion consists of strong emotions, and we need passion in life because it keeps us going. It helps us to drive forward. And then they need to understand, what is their purpose? Your purpose is always connected to another human being. We were not created to be on this planet by ourselves. We were not. It takes two human beings to bring us into this world. So when you take your passion and you combine it with your purpose, you can have something explosive. Essentially, when you have a specific goal at hand that you're trying to reach with other people. Now, what does that look like in terms of a timeline? If we said today, well, Larry, we want to have a committee of maybe 12 people in order to start the conversation of getting to this money that is sitting in these bank accounts, that is overflowing with these estates that these billionaires and these millionaires have, what does that committee look like? The committee would have to be diverse, but not just diverse in terms of ethnicity. Social economic status is another part of the diversity that we would have to bring to the table, because you need to hear from a senior citizen who is on the brink of eviction. You need to hear from a single mother who has been struggling to feed her children. You need to hear from someone who is getting ready to graduate from school and they're overwhelmed because of the debt that they're incurring. And then we would have to say, where would this meeting take place? Why? What is our why? Everybody should have a why in life. And so our why collectively as a committee would be to get to our community, our community leaders and our families and people who have an obligation to help others who are in need, to show them, if you're passionate about STEM, we can connect you to STEM Bridges Houston, which is a fabulous nonprofit organization ran by Dr. Jacqueline Howard Carr, where you have minorities, Hispanics, and African Americans and others who are seeking to money to go back to school and to transition into the STEM industry to give back. They're not just going to make six figures and to live in, high-end neighborhoods. They're actually wanting to give back. So we have to all stay interconnected. And there has to be this synergy and this flow when we see that there's a lack, that we meet it with a need. The needs are always going to be here. And then we would say, well, how? Have we identified the resources that we need to accomplish our goals? So yes, I think that, you know, when we look at this COVID climate and we see the disparity with our families just not having a place to stay, when we know that the unemployment rate was almost at 15% right here in Houston, Texas, and yes, they say it has gone down to maybe about 9%. I'm not quite sure that I agree with that, Larry. I don't necessarily believe that, because you do have some jobs that were temporarily available because COVID came. So once those jobs close out, then what are those families going to do?
We're in this era now in a post-George Floyd reality, in a John Lewis passing reality. The famous phrase from John Lewis, we need to all get into good trouble, necessary trouble. And if there was a time to get into good trouble and necessary trouble, this is it, with all the suffering we see around us. And this divide, this unfortunate divide between us and them and we and us in our society is really causing those bridges to be even more so. But here's what I know, what she knows, and what all of you on this audience knows, that who've been with us in this journey for Dialogue Houston for 27 seasons now. Remember what I told you when I ran Habitat for Humanity, when I raised money to build those homes for families, when I just took the picture of the family that I wanted to build a home for, that needed a home, and I told you their story. I always took a picture of the family. Mm-hmm. And two things that always worked, because I always left with the money and the check for the family, for the home, was either to appeal to people's big hearts, and there are caring, wonderful, loving people in this community. You just have to ask them and be willing to ask them, and be willing not to take no for an answer when you ask them.
All right.
And the other side of it is to always invoke holy guilt. Holy guilt is a wonderful thing, never to be underestimated. All right? Because one gives out of their good heart because they know it's the right thing to do, and they want to help, and no one has really ever asked them to help, and so now one is doing that. Or those who sit back and say, well, I don't know why I should, let me explain why you have to give. Because much you has been given to you is now expected that you give back. You know, we have a fascinating conversation with our guest, Leona Baker, who is the CEO of Plans of Action Houston. And she's been explaining very clearly about how and why we should all be involved with our passion and purpose, and what we can do in our own personal lives to move our agenda forward, but also to serve and help other human beings, because after all, that's the only reason we're on the face of this earth, is to serve other human beings. And so the question becomes, how do we do that in this environment that we're living in now? Lenora is going to share with us now, after the break, some more aspects of their work, how they accomplish their work. So I'm just going to turn it back to her right quick.
Well, one of the things, when I think of the question that you asked earlier in terms of collectiveness, working collectively, I also see a committee of people utilizing an equation, and that would be evidence. Evidence is research. Let's get our research together, see what's before us as it relates to who's suffering, how many people are suffering, what is the timeline of these individuals suffering, so forth and so on. And then the second thing would be the people on the committee, they would have clearly an area of expertise. Their background information is critical, because the background information that I have looks different than the background information and the experiences that Larry Payne has had over decades of working in the city of Houston and finding your way. So then you would say, okay, the evidence and the background information clearly is equal to us having an understanding. Once we have an understanding, then we're ready to apply a plan of action through building it step by step together. There is no reason why I cannot I should be able to clearly explain to my child, my 9-year-old daughter, what the plan of action is for the city of Houston as it relates to housing, food, shelter for every citizen in this city. I should be able to go on the website. And by the way, our politicians, the mayor, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, everybody has been doing an amazing job. She gave us clear instruction about HR 40 and how we need to jump on that and talk to our representatives. But we can't just leave it on our politicians. We as citizens, we have a responsibility. We have an obligation. So we just want to make sure that we do our research, think about the background information, experiences that we've had, and then apply our understanding and build a plan of action step by step, and just to give people a clear plan of action. This is what it looks like. This is what we're doing. Here are the resources that are available to you, because each person, Larry, and this is key, each person is starting at a different point. Everybody's starting point is different. Everybody's. Nobody is starting at the same place in life. Our starting point is as unique as our fingerprints. So in business, it was clear to me that I could not just go into a small business offering a consultant service. I could not offer music lessons. I could not just offer, inspiration and an award ceremony without taking into consideration, how am I building up my community? How am I building up my educators? How am I building up the parents who are in these homes with these children? And I have to just give Dr. Kleinberg a shout out, Larry. I have his book, and I will be calling him to join us for the podcast. I plan to have you as well. But this man deserves a Pulitzer Prize. He really does. When I looked at some of the research that he put in this book, and I did not know this, Larry, 70% of the young adults who are under 20 years of age in the city of Houston, okay, 70% are African American and Hispanics. And more than half of them do not have the resources, do not have the education to move forward in this economy. Unbelievable. We have got to do something, because this is just out of control. We were dealing with a crisis here in Houston with lack of resources as it relates to the Black and brown community way before COVID hit. But it's clearer now. We can clearly see with the disparities what areas are really weakening. And so the question becomes, how do we strengthen our social construct? How do we strengthen our families? And here it is, we're throwing families out of their homes, but it starts at home, Larry. Your mother's your first teacher.
So tell us, how do we reach you, and what do you have coming up next? Because there's just a little time left. I have to make a little closing statement. But so give us that information, please.
Well, everyone, you can find me at www.plansofactionhouston.com. Plansofactionhouston.com. You can also find me at the Inspiration Incubator, which is a podcast sponsored by Plans of Action Houston. And I'm looking for other sponsors. I'll be adding them on as time goes on. And I have an inspirational podcast where I contact some of my friends who are millionaires, and I'm having these conversations with them, not just about money and what they're doing, but also tapping into their wisdom, their knowledge, their understanding. What was their process in life? What were some of the habits and the lessons? I had a wonderful conversation with one of my, I call him my best friend, Malik Rose, and he used to play for the San Antonio Spurs, and his journey was just amazing. So you can log on to the Inspiration Incubator and listen, get the kids, let the children be inspired, because he talks about his process through elementary school all the way through high school and the MBA and beyond. So I hope everybody can join us.
All right, so that's her. That's where reach out to Leonora. Plans of Action. We're going to do some stuff with them going forward, including the dialogue with Dr. Kleinberg, our good friend, to all of us here in the city. I want to thank Leonora. We're going to continue this. We're going to follow the work. We have to, in this environment that we're in going forward. It's such a trying time. For such a time as this, we're all called forward to do what we need to do and have to do together, individually and collectively. So thank you for being on Dialogue Houston.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you.
Right. And we'll be in touch. Let me close out this section this way. We all know we're living in interesting times. Dr. Kleinberg always tells us, as the fourth largest city in America, a majority minority city going forward, the challenges we face and the opportunities we have both. To be the shining star on the hill, to be the example to the rest of America, to be even, in fact, Dr. Martin Luther King's beloved community. We have it all here in Houston. It's all waiting for us just to tap into it and make it a reality. It starts with some simple things, realizing, of course, that all of our daily lived experiential realities, are different than each other in this vast city. Different is different. Amen, period. Not better than, not more than, just less than. And if we could just leave it at that, we would all be better human beings, but we can't seem to leave it at that, which then brings into this discussion that we're having today about democracy. And what does democracy really mean? And what does it mean to be a citizen living in a democratic society? And we love still to focus, however, on two of the five tenets of what it means to be a citizen in democracy, which is our individual rights and privileges. We'll have that conversation all day, because who's that about? It's all about me. My individual rights and privileges, all about I and me. What about the other three tenets of citizenship and democracy? Our common duties, obligations, and responsibilities to whom? The other, to find the other increasingly in our society. Today, someone different than me, someone that does not look like me. But in fact, that person who does not look like you is your fellow human being. And this idea of all human beings' lives are equal. All human beings' lives matter. All human beings are the same any way you want to define that. We know that this country has not always been that way and felt that way about persons of color, particularly African Americans. We know that even in our Constitution at one time, African Americans are only 3/5 of a person in the Constitution. And still that 3/5 still lives today in the way some things are carried out in the treatment of people who you see as non-human beings or subhuman beings or less than a human being, so that you can do what you did to that human being in Minneapolis, and that you continue to do to human beings all across this country every day. I say that as chair of the Mayor's Police Reform Committee, as chair of the Mayor of Houston's Police Reform Committee, as we work on our task force, rather, as we work on our work going forward. And every day there seems to be a new incident somewhere in another major city or another city period in this country. So we are faced with the question of asking going forward in an election year, in a voting year, in citizenship, just register, just vote. You know, we have a great partnership with the League of Women Voters here in Houston. Just a reminder, you can register to vote still till October 5th. Early voting starts early, October 12th through October 30th. So those 17 days of actually being able to vote in person early. This is the year to do it if you've never done it. As Lenora said, remember, Kleinberg tells us very clearly the future of our workforce, the future of Houston depends on these children in these schools who are getting an inadequate education. If 70% of your population under the age of 30 years old are all African Americans and Hispanics, and they're not getting educated, they weren't getting great education before COVID-19, it's even harder now in a COVID-19 environment. Our next segment of the show is going to talk about ways that are helping those students achieve their goals, helping them with study habits, helping them with homework, helping them to understand the resources available through them even at their Houston Public Library. So everybody's trying to do their piece, but this is trying times. But I start where I begin, I end where I began. But this is a time that we're all called to stand up, show up, act up, and follow up, and speak up. And so we challenge you to do that in this environment, not for yourself. We're put on this earth to be servant leaders, and a servant leader, I'm here to serve other human beings, not myself. And so we have to be clear on that going forward. We're going to try to do some shows coming up that kind of amplify this responsibility of all of us as servant leaders. And so please stay part of this wonderful ongoing dialogue. We are very thankful always to HCC and HCC TV for Dialogue Houston, now going into 27 years of doing this. And so we look forward to you joining us. I'm gonna have to get out of here for now because time is always fleeting too quickly. But as always, be safe, stay well, until we see each other again. Peace, power, and love.